Welcome to Washed by the Word. I'm Pastor Kon, and I wanted to personally welcome you to our Sunday morning service as we go verse by verse through God's Word. It's our desire here by Washed by the Word that the Spirit of God will speak to you intimately as we go verse by verse through His Word. So welcome again to our Sunday morning service, and I look forward to hearing from all of you, sharing with us what God has shown you today as you get washed by the Word. All right, we will get into chapter 27 of 1 Samuel today. It was a good day for kids' ministry because 1 Samuel 27 is only 12 verses. Now, we mentioned last week, make sure you come today because we're going to talk about, remember, horoscopes and all the occult and all that. That'll be next week because that's chapter 28. I was going to do chapter 27 and 28, but after talking with James and Dina, and they needed some time, so that's fine. We'll just do chapter 27 only today. So, short chapter. We'll be out of here by 1 o'clock easy. So here we go. So welcome. We're good to go. Here we go. Here we go. In Psalm 32, verse 8 and 9, it says this: I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. God speaking to his people. He says, I will guide you with my eye. And then he says something real interesting to his people. He says, do not be like the horse. Don't be like the mule, which have no understanding. And that kind of sums up what we're going to be looking at in chapter 27, because as we look at this, God says, I want that relationship with you that I can just give you a look and you'll respond. He says, don't be like the horse, that impulsive type of person that rushes carelessly out into battle. Don't be like that. He says, don't be like the mule, that stubborn personality and just holds back. No, I won't. He says, don't be like a horse. Don't be like a mule. He says, have this close relationship with me that I can just give you a glance and you'll know to go. I'll give you a glance. You'll know to stay. Those of you that have children, you know what that's like. They're going to do something and you can just give them a look and they go, okay. Got it. Got it. That's what the Lord wants with all of us. He wants that close relationship, guys. That close relationship where he can guide us with a look. Well, in chapter 27, this portion of 1 Samuel in the life of David, and those of you that are here for the first time, we've been looking at the life of David. We started in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1. We just worked our way through the scriptures. So we looked at Samuel, we looked at Saul, now we're looking at David. And David's had his up and down moments. But today, if you're a fan of David, sorry. You're going to feel kind of that heaviness in your pit. It's sort of like being a Cowboy fan. You just have that, oh man. It's one of those kind of deals. It's kind of those kind of deals. It was there, I took it, okay. But at any rate, as we get into chapter 27, we're going to see that this chapter, as well as chapters 29 and 30, they show us David's life when he left what God had for him. We're going to see David deciding to live his own life. Enough is enough, you know. I've given it enough. And we're going to start to see David now trying to live his life by his own understanding, rather than living by that intimate, loving guidance of the Lord. And we can understand a little bit as we look at his life, you know, how that can happen. It's happened to most of us at one time or another. We look at David's life. He's been on the run. He's been a fugitive living in the wilderness for 7 years. God has been protecting him and providing for him all this time. All of his needs have been met. Not all of his greeds, but his needs have been met. But he wasn't living the life like a lot of folks were living. He had to go without in a lot of areas. But God was protecting him, providing for him. He had been anointed the future king of Israel. He knew that. One day that would be his. One day. There we go. I was waiting for you, buddy. Thank you. It's good to have you here, James. And one day he knew that throne would be his. Now we saw he even has additional responsibilities. He has his second first wife, remember. Remember, Michal was his first wife, and Saul gave her away. Her dad gave her away when David was a fugitive. So he marries two wives. Does God condone that? Of course not. But does it record it? Of course it does. So now he's got two wives he's providing for. He's got 600 men out here in the wilderness, and it says later on we're going to see and their families. People estimate up to 3,000 people in the wilderness that David is feeling responsible for. He's been on the run. Many people believe he wrote Psalm 13 at this time where he says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" I'm the king, right? God, come on. "How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily?" Little did David know that in just 3 short years, he will be ruling the people of Judah from Hebron. And shortly thereafter, he'll be the king of all of Israel. David could not see that God was using these difficulties to form David, to prepare David for all that he had for him, to make him a man of God. And we're going to see today that David, looking at his circumstances, makes a decision. I've had it. I've been faithful to God all these years, and what has it gotten me type of attitude. And now he chooses to go his own way and to solve his own problems. Spurgeon said, "He who doesn't trust God will soon seek comfort somewhere else." You're going to trust something or someone. And now we're going to see David making a choice. Not a good choice. This is kind of David's dark chapter in 1 Samuel. This is the dark one. We've seen David do good and bad. We've seen David spare Saul when he's had opportunities, take him out twice. We've seen David tell Jonathan to lie. We've seen David lie to the priest Ahimelech there at Nob. So he goes up and he goes down. He goes up and he goes down. Now David is going to tank. You see, it's never a good idea to look at God through our circumstances, rather than to look at our circumstances through God. And that is what we want to leave here with today. We're going to see David trying to handle it himself. And he's not the first to do that, to look at the circumstances rather than look at God. We're reminded of Moses in Numbers chapter 11. He says, "Man, there's just too many. There's too many people, God. And he lays out, "Just kill me, God. Just kill me." In Numbers 11, he says that. You ever felt that way? It's just too much. I can't take another day. Just take me out, God. Elijah, remember in 1 Kings chapter 19, he's on the run from Jezebel after he stood up the prophets of Baal. And Jezebel throws a threat at him. "You killed my prophets, Elijah? You're going to be just like one of them tomorrow at this time." And Elijah, standing up to all these 400 prophets of Baal, freaks out from this woman's threat and takes off on the run. And he goes under a little bush and he just says, "That's it, I'm done. I'm the only one here. It's just me. I've had it. I'm done. Take me out, God." Goes into the throes of depression. The Bible appears to be teaching us over and over and over again, depression is the result of looking at anything other than God in the midst of hard times. So we can choose to look at God, or we can just try and dull the pain by seeking ungodly counsel. The choice is really ours. So now in chapter 27, we're going to see David relying on his own street smarts rather than trusting in God. Again, the last verse before we get into the text, Proverbs 3:5, you're aware of it. "Trust in the Lord," goes on, "with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding." Trust in God, not in yourself. I know we're smart. And right now, if we were to list the top 3 smartest people in this room, I guarantee you every one of us would pick one person, and that is ourselves. Who's the smartest in the room? Well, me and 2 others. Let's see. That's just how we are, because we got it figured out. We know what's up, So we got to try and figure out a way to get rid of that. And it's difficult because we like ourselves so much. So now, in chapter 27, We're going to see the source of the problem. David's doing well. I mean, he just scored another home run. He did not take Saul out again. Remember, Saul was sleeping in the camp? Remember? Yes. And he didn't kill him. He did it again. Home run, Saul. And we say every time you get a spiritual home run, be ready, because usually the enemy is right there to make certain that we strike out real soon. Well, this time, David does it himself, and he does something I believe all of us have done. It says in verse 1, and David said in his heart. David, why are you talking to your heart? Remember, the heart was the seat of thought during this time? Today, we say the mind is the seat of thought. Back then, the heart was the seat of thought. So you thought with your heart. That's why the Bible says God knows the thoughts and intents of your heart. Valentine's Day, we have these balloons coming up here with these hearts. And you see hearts, and all the women are going, oh, hearts. And all the guys are going, I got to remember that. I got to remember Valentine's Day's coming up in 8 days. Got to do something with a heart. I got to get a heart out there somewhere. I got to do something with a heart. Don't forget. And the wife is sitting there saying, don't you forget that heart. In these days, they didn't use the heart as a symbol of love. They used the splanchnon, your intestines. Those butterflies, remember. The butterflies in the stomach, that was the seat of love. Could you imagine the interesting cards we would have? Just have some intestines there. The kids have balloons and it'd just be intestines, large intestines, small intestines. Oh, look at the intestines. That is so sweet. I love you with all my intestines. That's what it was. But as we look at this, it says David said in his heart, in his mind. David is talking to himself. Not talking out loud necessarily. He's thinking. Talking to himself in his mind. But you know, if we don't say it out loud, it's just as powerful when the thoughts run in our mind. And what we say to ourselves, guys, shapes our thinking. And eventually it shapes our actions. And it'll ultimately shape our destiny. What we say to ourselves. David's not talking to the Lord here. He's always talking to the Lord. He's always seeking the Lord. But here at the beginning of chapter 27, he says to his heart. He's now talking to himself, not to the Lord. And as a result, we're going to see he ends up with the wrong conclusion. We're going to see him fall into depression, and we're going to see he's going to end up in the enemy's camp. And the same thing happens with us when we choose to talk with ourselves rather than with the Lord. And we know we've all done it. Sometimes we do it right here. We walk out to the car madder than all mad. She didn't even say hi to me. I don't know who she thinks she is. Didn't say hi. She probably didn't like the way I'm walking. She probably didn't. You're right. I think it's a pretty smart choice. And we sit there, and by the time we get to the car, we have completely thrown someone under the bus by talking to ourselves and agreeing with ourselves because we're pretty smart. And we go back, and now we're mad at someone for absolutely no reason whatsoever other than we were talking to ourselves. The difference when we talk to the Lord. Lord, she didn't say hi to me this morning. She must be really busy. She must have a heavy heart. Something's on her mind. God, pray for her. Or God, I want to pray for her. God, I lift her up to you. Just bless her. God, I'm going to pray for her this week. What a difference. What a difference. Do we talk to ourselves or do we talk to the Lord? Talking to myself, we've all done it. Convincing ourselves that we are right. And when we do that, much like David, we're going to see, we end up on the road to Gath. Let's take a look at the text. And David said in his heart, now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. What kind of statement is that? God has been protecting him for 7 years. Saul keeps going after him, and God keeps protecting him. But talking to himself, that's it. I've done it. I've trusted him long enough. Time for me to take things in my own hand. This is not going to work. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape to the land of the Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me any more in any part of Israel. You ever been there? I've been following the Lord. What has it gotten me? There's nothing better for me than to go back into the world, to go to the land of the Philistines. He says, if I go there, Saul won't chase me there. I won't be a threat. It's done. It's going to be great. And in his own mind, I wouldn't be surprised if he says, that's a great idea, David. Thanks, I came up with it myself. It's interesting, we justify our position. We have a good heart-to-heart with ourselves. You ever have a good heart-to-heart with yourself? I have those. Just a good heart-to-heart. I just need to get alone and think. No, you need to get alone and pray. Amen. You get alone and think, you're talking to yourself. Get alone and talk to God. Big difference. If you're having a good heart-to-heart with yourself, Dina, that was interesting, the scripture used in Jeremiah 17, because I'm going to have folks turn to Jeremiah 17, but we're going to go to the verse right after what you said. But let's go back to chapter 17. Let's go back to verse 8 again, because let's go back to verse 5. Chapter 17, verse 5 of Jeremiah. Here's the verse that they talked about in kids' ministry. Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man. I underline that. Because if anybody wants to be cursed, you want God's curses on you? Here's what you do. Just trust in somebody else or yourself. And God says you'll be cursed. So there you go. You want to be cursed? Do that. And makes flesh his strength, talking about himself, whose heart departs from the Lord. David's about to do that. For he'll be like a shrub in the desert, no deep root, and shall not see when good comes, but shall inherit the parched places in the wilderness and a salt land which is not inhabited. But then look at this. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord. So we can trust in other people or in ourselves, or we can trust in the Lord, whose hope is in the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river, and will not fear when heat comes, and heat will come. In our life there will be heat, but you will not fear when heat comes. But its leaf will be green, it will not be anxious in the year of drought, nor will cease from yielding fruit. You'll be fruitful. That's a good thing. Just trust in the Lord. But then verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked. Who can know it? When we have a good heart-to-heart, I wrote in my Bible years ago, I got this. I got this. You don't got nothing. You don't got this. God has it. Now you can trust in yourself and be cursed. You can trust in somebody else and be cursed. Or you can trust in God and be blessed. It's up to you. Those that choose to trust in others or in yourself and be cursed, you can set up an appointment with the front office. We'll be glad to help you. Counsel you once you get the consequence of the curse of God on your life. We'll be glad to be there and say, man, that was a bummer, huh? And we'll just pray for you as you go through the consequences of trusting in people and trusting in yourself. And we'll love you. But choice is yours. So David, as you can see, verse 1 is the key to this entire chapter. David talking to himself. And the result is a mess. Wouldn't it be interesting to take 2 stopwatches? Just have them with us. Just 2 of them. For those of you that are the younger generation, a stopwatch is a round little thing. It looks like a clock, kind of. You can take your phone and do the same thing on there, I guess. And either way, but could you imagine having 2 phones and going to the clock part and the stopwatch on there? But have 2 stopwatches. And every time you talk to yourself about a situation or someone else, click it. Then you're done. Click it off. Then, click it. Click it off. Back for the day of a situation that you're in. And on the other, whenever you talk to God, click it. Wouldn't it be interesting to look at the amount of time on each watch at the end of a day in a tough situation? More likely than not, most of us would have 5 hours talking to God and 3 minutes talking to ourselves and other people. Interesting. David trusted God for his provision, his protection all this time. And now he decides to trust the Philistines. And what's crazy in chapter 27, it works for a while. He makes the choice and he gets blessed big time. Or so it seems. So that's what we want to take a look at. Here we go, verse 2. Then David arose and went over with the 600 men who were with him to Achish, the son of Maach, king of Gath. Remember, he'd gone to Gath before? Remember with the beard and the spittle on his beard and all, acting like he's crazy, So David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, each man with his household. And David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's widow. And it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he sought him no more. No more being chased by Saul. If you've ever done that, you know the feeling. You're in the front lines trying to further the kingdom of God. Maybe you're doing it by just the way you're constructing your home. We are going to be a Christian home. We're going to do this. And the more you do it, it seems like the enemy is attacking. What's the deal? Then you go, forget about it. And the attacks stop. This is great. Maybe at work, you're just trying to have a Christian witness at work, and no, I will not go to those things. I will not be part of that. And you're being ostracized, and you're at work alone, and it's like, a little bit's not going to hurt, and you give in. You lose your testimony, but at least I'm one of the gang again. That's nice. And for a while, it seems like, this isn't so bad. I gave in. It's better. That would be David right now. These Philistines aren't that bad. As long as they don't bring Goliath's sword with me. That seemed to be the issue. So I'll just enjoy my time with the Philistines. I don't have that Saul coming after me all the time. These Philistines are really nice people. You ever gone into the world and found that to be the truth? You go into the world and say, these worldly people are pretty nice. They're very accepting. They don't care if I sin at all. In fact, they encourage me. Go to church, they don't let me do nothing. No, you can do anything you want. It's between you and God. We're just glad you're here. But the world, David runs to Gath. And here he is in Gath doing his thing. Then David said to Achish, if I have now found favor in your eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country that I may dwell there. For why should your servant, now David's calling himself the servant of Gath, nice. Your servant dwell in the royal city with you. He says, I'm not worthy to stay with you, Achish. You're the king, and I'm just, I don't want to be here. So Achish gave him Ziklag, 25 miles to the southwest there of Gath, and therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. If you look on a map, James was talking about maps, how much he likes maps. He does like maps. This guy's a mapaholic, man. It's crazy. But if you look at the maps, there's Gath on the west part of Israel, remember? And then you see the tribes, the distribution of the tribes. Remember those, you were doing those classes? And remember where Judah was down south, and then Reuben has that circle within Judah, and they say, well, are the Simeonites, the Simeonites have that little part right down in there in Judah? Well, it's interesting because right on the border of Simeon and Judah there, it bumps into Philistine territory. And Ziklag is right there. So Ziklag's got a unique position of kind of like being on the Simeon border in Judah, but controlled under the umbrella of the Philistines at this point. So it couldn't be a better place for David, because he's still in Judah now, in Ziklag, but he's got the umbrella of the Philistines there. So again, you can look at that and say, these Philistines aren't that bad. Saul's leaving me alone. I'm protected. This is good. This is real good. Probably looked at both of his wives and said, you're lucky to have me because I got this. Good luck with that, David. Here we go. So Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. Now, the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months, 16 months in the enemy's camp or in the enemy's jurisdiction. That's a significant backslide. 16 months? He's out there. And it appears most of the time he feels like, this is pretty good. Should have done this 7 years ago. David's in a mess right now. We look at this as we get into verse 8 here. Verse 8. And David and his men went up and raided the Gershurites, the Girzites, the Amalekites. It's interesting. These were some of the people groups that Joshua and his men were to take out when they came into the promised land. They never did. So now David, there in Judah, under a Philistine umbrella, is fighting against the enemies of Israel, taking them out. But notice what he says in verse 8. He raided them. The word raid is an interesting word in the Hebrew. Those of you that are studying Greek and Hebrew right now, this word literally means to strip off a dead body, which is interesting. That puts David in a whole new light here. David and his men went up and raided these people. For those nations with the inhabitants of the land from of old, as you go to shore, even as far as the land of Egypt, whenever David attacked the land, notice here it is, he left neither man nor woman alive. Took away the sheep, the ox, the donkeys, camels, the apparel, and returned and came to Achish. So he killed everything and took the valuables off the dead bodies, go back to Achish. And Achish would say, where have you made the raid today, David? And then David would say, against the southern area of Judah. Well, he was in that area. He's giving that white lie. Or against the southern area of the Jeremielites, or against the southern area of the Kenites. So Achish hears that and says, this is awesome. David's going on killing other Jews. This is fantastic. This is great. And yet the children of Israel say, this David's amazing. He's killing our enemies. So David can look back and say, the best thing I ever did was go back into the world. Everyone likes me. I have free hand to take as much as I want. This is fantastic. And isn't that the way when we start to backslide? The enemy is such a jerk that he actually blesses us for a while in our backslide to put the seal on it. Old friends that don't know Christ all of a sudden like you again. There's no more tension at gatherings anymore because you're right in there partying with them. So life is good. This is great. We should have done this a long time ago. You were all religious there for a while. Yeah, we got kind of crazy, you know. Just a phase I was going through. It lasted 58 years, but I got it. Took me a while to figure that one out, you know. David would save neither man nor woman alive to bring news to Gath. So everybody, some little 7-year-old girl would go running off over the hill. Oh, he'd kill everybody. He'd hunt them down and kill them too. Make sure nobody gets there. Think about that. It's amazing what we do, is it not, when we are not walking with the Lord? Things we thought we would never do, all of a sudden we're doing. Are okay in it at least. We're condoning it in our own life. It's crazy. He says, get them lest they should inform on us, saying, thus David did, and thus was his behavior all the time he dwelt in the country of the Philistines. Duh. Of course it is. When David was walking with the Lord, he struggled. Remember, we'd mentioned it earlier. He asked Jonathan to lie for him. Remember in chapter 20, verse 6. Just tell your dad that I went to Bethlehem for a feast. Just lie for me. We remember Ahimelech the priest. Oh, Saul sent me on a mission. David seems to struggle with lying. Here he's lying again. This time he's lying to cover up the fact that he's a murderer. He's a robber. He's an armed robber. He's a murderer. He's a liar. David is struggling, and yet God tells us David was a man after his own heart. We've got to deal with that in our head. It's going to get worse. He's going to put a hit out on Uriah. He's going to commit adultery with Bathsheba. It's like, he's a man after God's own heart? Seriously. Yet we're reminded that God works with imperfect people. If anybody here, I normally don't do this, I'm going to have you do it. If you've ever sinned, if you're not perfect, I want you to raise your hand up as high as you can. You know what that means? You are qualified for God to use. Isn't that something? God uses imperfect people. David right now is really jacked up. And it's going to get way worse. I looked right at you when I said that. Sorry, Rachel. But it's going going to get worse for David than he is right now, but this is the start. This is the kind of the start, the seedbed of David's sin. We're going to look at it in 2 Samuel, verse 11, with Bathsheba and Uriah. And if it had only been rooted out here. But we're going to see it doesn't get rooted out. David appears to be successful. He's got tons of activity. He's going out on raids, coming back. But again, activity does not equal spirituality. Oftentimes, religious activity is just a cover for the secret sin that we've got going. And David's got a secret sin going. And a lot of activity. David was successful. He was undefeated. He was undefeated. Every battle he went into, he just took it over. But success does not equal true spirituality. If we're walking with the Lord, we'll experience a measure of success one way or another. It might very well be we'll be so successful we'll end up broken, sick, and dead. But we'll end up in glory. And there's true success. It's not how much we have. It's how much have we placed at the foot of the cross. And is our faith truly 100% in Jesus? That's win. That's victory. That's victory. Well, chapter 27 ends in verse 12. So Achish believed David, saying, he's made his people Israel utterly abhor him. Why? Because he's killing all these Israelites in the southern part of Judah. This is fantastic. They'll never take him back now. And he and these 600 men, these are some good fighters. These are like the special ops group. This is fantastic. He says, therefore he will be my servant forever. Now, chapter 27 ends in our Bibles here, but in the Hebrew text, the thought ends in the first two verses of 28, so we're going to pick up those two verses. Now, it happened in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for war to fight with Israel. And Achish said to David, you assuredly know that you will go out with me to battle, you and your men. Oh, here it comes home. The rooster comes home to roost. The 16-month vacation of backsliding, enjoying the things of the world. This is fantastic. Payday has come. Payday has come. And now Achish says, you know you're going to fight with me against Israel. You understand that. Payday comes a lot of different ways for us today, does it not? I'm leaving. Payday. Man, I thought we had this agreement. I won't say nothing. You don't say nothing. And we'll just be Christians at church, but at home we do our own thing. This is great, man. This is awesome. Payday came. I'm leaving. What do you mean you're leaving? I can't live this way. What are you talking about? I'm leaving. Payday. Go to the doctor, and he says, you got 3 months. Payday. 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 David hits payday. You're going to battle with me. So David said to Achish, well, surely you know what your servant can do. He doesn't say, well, that's kind of non-committal. It's like, okay, old David, he's street smart. And Achish said to David, therefore, I'm going to make you one of my chief guardians, literally bodyguard, forever. I trust you, David. I know what you can do. You got my back. And David now finds himself defending the Philistines against Israel. You ever been there in a state of backslidden state, and all of a sudden you're accepted by the world, and they're there talking about Christians, but you so much want them to like you that you say, yeah, Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. That's where David is. That's where David is. Somehow he switched sides. Somehow. How'd that happen? Oh yeah, he was talking to himself. That's how that happens. He stopped talking to God. He had it all figured out. Well, next week we're going to see Saul freaking out because, and you can imagine what Saul's thinking. This is David. This is the kid that took down Goliath that Saul was afraid of. This is that David that spared his life twice. This is the David the song went about. Remember, Saul killed his thousands? Yeah. But David his tens of thousands? What? That's that David. And now David's with the Philistines. And the Philistines are a rough group anyway. Now they got David and his 600 men. Saul freaks out. So he starts calling out to God finally, and guess what? A life lived apart from God in disobedience to God. That deathbed, I'm going to call out to God at the end. Guess what? God didn't answer. That's a scary thought. Saul didn't answer, so then we're going to look at Saul doing something really stupid. He's going to hear from God any which way he can. So he's going to do that. And then we're going to pick up David. And we're going to see God's hand on a man who's completely making bad decisions. And God steps in, intervenes, and covers David. It's the most amazing thing. So encouraging. It's so encouraging to see what God does with David. So David's hard times, he had enough. He got tired, and he left. In our LIT 1 class, we're assigning different men in church history to the guys. We do that all the time. Will, 3 years ago, we assigned, I forget who we assigned to. Anybody know who we assigned to Will? Who was that, Will? George Whitfield. If you want to know anything about George Whitfield, ask Will. If you don't want to know anything about George Whitfield, sit by Will. You will know everything about George Whitfield. This man knows George Whitfield like I've never met anybody in my life knowing George Whitfield. It's crazy. But we assign different guys, different people in the history of the church to each guy, and they're doing their research on it, whether it's John Wycliffe over with Randy, Martin Luther with Pastor Anthony. They've got these different guys. George Mueller for Gil. And I miss him. Will, you had Jonathan Edwards now. So those are those guys. We got Knox out there. We got all these different folks that are just being assigned different people. Well, I thought it was only fair that I'd do somebody because I got all them reading about it. So I did John Bunyan. So I've been hitting John Bunyan. John Bunyan, remember the one that, I said Paul Bunyan yesterday. Thanks, Dave, for bringing that up. But John Bunyan. But John Bunyan, as you know, ended up going to prison for Christ. And while he was there, he wrote Pilgrim's Progress. But as I was reading Bunyan's very small intro to his collection of works, at the end of it, he said something that was so interesting and tied into today that I just want to share it quickly. But here's a guy who went to prison for Christ. So he went without for Christ. And I hear that and I go, man, that Bunyan, what a guy. You know, if you went to prison for Christ, and he stayed in there, this is 12 years after 12 years of imprisonment, he wrote this. And if he's 12 years in prison for Christ, losing everything for Christ, you know that guy had a strong walk. I bet he didn't have any temptation. He's just in there saying, I'm suffering for Jesus. And he wrote the 7 abominations of his heart. And as I read them, and if I'm going to be honest, because I thought, man, this guy wrote it down on paper. He wrote down the 7 abominations of his heart. I just put them up here. Take a look at this. These are some of the things he went to. And you wonder about David at this time, if he wasn't having some of these things. And sometimes we might have this when things are looking rough. We go, this isn't right. I'm giving my life to Jesus, and I don't have anything like I thought I was going to have. I think I wasted my life following Christ. Well, here is Bunyan in prison. And he says, the first abomination of my heart as I'm alone in prison for Christ was my inclination to unbelief. Is this really for real? We're talking my one life I have to live. And I'm living it for Christ, or am I? And how many times have we maybe had that temptation? Well, I'll give him 90%, but I want 10% just in case this doesn't all work out. At least I have a good life, you know. He says, I have an inclination to unbelief, to go 100% in. Number 2, he says, I tend to forget God's love and his mercy. Amen. I forget that sometimes. I go, uh-oh. Old Bunyan's starting to meddle in my life now. Because if we really remember all the time God's love and mercy, we will extend that love and mercy to others. So the fact that we don't love someone, we don't forgive someone, tells us we forgot God's love and mercy. The third, he says, I tend to lean toward the works of the law. Wow. I went to church. The Vikings are supposed to win if you go to church. I should get something for doing something good. He says, I have a coldness in my prayer. My mind wanders in prayer. I pray and I start thinking about everything but. Or I pray just out of a coldness. The fifth, he says, I forget to watch for the needs of others. I live my life and I don't pray for them. I just think, oh, that stinks. Stinks to be you, sorry. And we don't pray for these needs. For these needs. He says, I murmur for what I don't have, for my lack. God, why don't I have that? They have that. Why don't I have that? And I abuse what he does give me. Therein lies the answer. Why don't I have that? You're not taking care of what you do have. And lastly, he says, my corruptions, they're thrust into my good intentions. I'm going to read the Bible every day this week, and I'm going to go for it for 10, count them, 10 minutes. I'm going to do it every day. Good intentions. But then my corruptions. As soon as I watch the highlights from the game, as soon as, Lord, I'm so tired, I'll do 20 tomorrow. Some of us owe God right now about 3.5 years of reading. It's just what it is. You know how we are. You know how we are. But he taught, and I thought, this is Bunyan, the author of the book that is the bestseller in the history of the world apart from the Bible. And if you have not read Pilgrim's Progress, I encourage you, read Pilgrim's Progress. But if you do, try and get the updated English version, because the old English version is really tough. Unless you like Shakespeare, then get it. But you can get one in our language. And it's worth reading. It really is worth reading. It's phenomenal. Phenomenal book. And that's what he went through when he gave up everything to follow Christ. He still had these temptations. But then he goes on and he says, but those temptations bring about good. He got it. The hard time in my life, I can see that God's working in my life through this hard times. He says, these things, they make me abhor myself. He goes on to say, I tend to like myself too much. But when I go through all this and I look at, I say, oh God, I really do need you. I am really a sinner, huh? He says, they keep me from trusting myself. They convince me of the sin that I was born in and continue to see show itself in my life. They help me remember the necessity of running to Jesus. It presses prayer because apart from prayer and running to Christ, I don't have a chance. He reminds me I need to watch and be sober. And how important it is for me to ask God to carry me on in my walk here in this life. And I looked at that and I go, there's David in chapter 27. His flesh got him. He just got tired. He's been on the run, doing what's right, and he's living in caves. And it told us at the end of 26, Saul went back to his place. Saul goes back and has the golden goblet. David goes back to the cave. And he says, he's going to get me one of these times. I'm not sure this God walk is worth it. It's not too late for me to grab whatever's left. I'm going to the Philistines. And he does. And he gets his own city. It worked. Got his own city. 16 months later, payday. So here we are today. Have a great week. Nothing like an uplifting message to go on in with. But as we look at this, it's a reminder for us guys, keep our eyes on Christ. Some of us are going through hard times. Some of us don't have what we think we should have, what we deserve. But if we really look in the mirror, we realize we don't deserve anything but to go to hell. We don't deserve anything. Our next breath is a gift from God. That meal waiting for us is a gift from God. Guys, look at your wife. Just look at your wife right now. That's God's gift to you. You don't deserve her. But aren't you thankful that God gives good gifts? It says in James, every good gift comes down from the Father of lights. That's God's gift to you. Take care of her. Well, you take care of what God gives you. Well, I deserve it. No, you don't deserve nothing. And you look at your wife, you don't deserve her. I guarantee you that. I know you guys. I know me. We are blessed beyond measure. Thank you, Ramon. That's what I was waiting for. Come on, guys. Hug that woman. There she is right there. Give her a hug. Come on. Yeah, that's it. Come on. You can kiss. You're married. Go ahead. It's good. We'll have a little makeout session. Go ahead. Just have your fun with your wife. Go ahead. Just do your thing. It's okay. It's okay. But it's your wife. Love your wife. Thank God for your wife. It's your wife, guys. Don't complain about your wife. Love your wife. God gave you her. It's pretty good. One of the sweetest things I've seen recently with a husband and wife is I met with Guy just now. Guy lives across the street, and Becky got diagnosed with some kidney stuff. Brand new Christian. There he is, and it looks kind of scary there for a minute. And to see the love that a man had for his wife right there, it just blessed my heart. So please pray for her. And he wasn't playing. He was like, seriously. It was awesome. And God bless you on top of it. And there she is, all good. And even lost some weight out of the deal. It was like, sweet. It's a win-win deal. This is awesome. It was awesome. But God blesses, guys. Just love your wife or your fiance. Love him. Enjoy your life. Going through hard times is because God has a beautiful plan for you. And he's turning you into what you know he wants you to be. Because he's promised you to reign with him. And just as David is being trained up to inherit the throne, you are being trained up to inherit the kingdom one day. This is our training ground. This is our sanctification time. Hard times, they're not bad. They're just hard. But we keep our eyes on the Lord. It's going to take more than a hard time to get our eyes off Christ, right? We're just going to love Jesus. We're going to encourage each other. We're going to help each other along the way as we go through ups and downs and troubles. And instead of talking to ourselves about everybody, we're going to talk to God about everybody. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to love everybody. We're just going to love. Remember our motto here, our mission statement here is everyone who comes through these doors will be the most loved and the best taught they can possibly be. We're going to feed and we're going to love. And you are being deputized to feed and to love. Just feed and love, feed and love, feed and love. Have a great, great day in Christ. A great week in Christ.